Have you ever reached a point where you realized your family was taking your love for granted? This is the true story of a mother who prepared everything for her son's wedding, only to discover she was secretly expected to babysit 20 children for free. What happened next changed her life, and her family, forever. To protect their privacy, I've changed their names and locations. So sit back, listen closely, and follow the journey. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the latest stories. Please like this video and leave a comment saying I'm listening so we can stay connected and share these stories together. Linda Cooper was 68 and had lived for decades in a small pastel-painted house on a quiet street in Ocean Beach, San Diego. From her kitchen window she could see the Pacific breaking against the pier and hear the gulls every morning. 10 years a widow, she still wore her wedding band, a small habit she hadn't been able to let go of since her husband Bill passed away. Before retirement she'd been a nurse at Scripps Mercy Hospital. Her neighbors still called her Nurse Linda because she was always the one who brought soup when someone was sick. Her only child, Daniel Cooper, had left home long ago for the Bay Area. Now 35, he was a software engineer at Google in Mountain View, living the life of deadlines and code. His fiancée, Emily Baker, was 32, a third-grade teacher at a sunny little school in Palo Alto. When Daniel called one breezy afternoon in March to tell her they were finally setting a wedding date, Linda had pressed the phone to her chest and closed her eyes. For a moment she felt as if she were back in her 30s, planning her own wedding, full of nervous excitement. "Mom," Daniel had said on speakerphone, his voice tinny but warm, "Emily and I are thinking about a fall wedding at Balboa Park. We want it to feel like a celebration, not just an event." "You're going to have the most beautiful wedding," Linda replied. Her eyes were shining. "I'll make sure of it." She had surprised even herself when she added, "I want to do the food for you, sweetheart. Let me handle the reception. Please." On the other end of the line there was a pause, then Daniel laughed. "Mom, that's a lot of work. There'll be almost 200 guests." "I've been cooking for people my whole life," she said, leaning against the kitchen counter, the smell of her tomato basil soup filling the room. "Let me show Emily how our family celebrates. I'll make it a feast they'll never forget." From that day on, Linda threw herself into the preparations with the kind of focus she used to give her patients. She kept a worn leather notebook filled with menus and seating charts. 3 nights a week she tested recipes in her kitchen: carnitas tacos with pineapple salsa to honor Emily's father's Mexican heritage, and pecan-crusted chicken with cornbread to remember Bill's southern roots. She clipped coupons, visited farmers markets at dawn, and phoned old friends for advice on how to stretch $4,500 of ingredients into a buffet for 180 guests. Neighbors would see her in the garden at twilight, trimming roses and gathering eucalyptus for centerpieces, her hair pulled back in a scarf, humming to herself. She would glance at her phone, scroll through pictures of Daniel and Emily, and smile. "This is my gift to them," she murmured one evening, arranging mason jars for the tables. "Not a duty. A joy." In her mind, she wasn't just planning a wedding reception. She was helping to build the memory of a lifetime, a day her son would remember long after she was gone. Every list she made, every blossom she clipped from her garden, every dollar she spent out of her savings felt like a quiet love letter to Daniel and Emily, a promise that on their big day, everything would be perfect. From the first time Daniel brought Emily home to Ocean Beach, Linda had opened her arms to the young woman as if she were her own daughter. Emily was 32 but had a way of speaking softly, like someone still looking for a place to belong. Almost every other weekend she would drive down from Palo Alto in her little blue Honda Civic, parking under the jacaranda tree in front of Linda's bungalow. She'd step out with a paper bag of fresh sourdough from an artisanal bakery and a small bundle of lavender tied with twine. "For you, Ms. Linda," she'd say with a shy smile. Inside the kitchen, the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls would wrap around them like a hug. Linda loved those visits. She would pour 2 mugs of coffee and they would sit at the little round table by the window where she used to help Daniel with his homework. Emily always had a compliment ready. "Ms. Linda, you make the best clam chowder in all of San Diego," she'd exclaim, licking a bit of cream from her finger. Daniel, sitting nearby, would chuckle and nudge her shoulder. She's right, Mom. You're going to spoil us, he'd say, pride in his eyes. It was during one of those weekends that Linda had taken out a yellowing index card from a tin box on the top shelf. This, she told Emily, is my grandmother's Key West lemon pie recipe. People drive across town for a slice. She placed it gently into Emily's hands. Your family now, so you should have it. Emily had gasped as if receiving a rare jewel. Oh my gosh, Ms. Linda, thank you. I'll treasure this, she said, blinking back what looked like tears. That moment had sealed something in Linda's heart. She had always wanted a daughter, and now, after years of widowhood, she felt she'd been given one. Especially when Emily confided, late one night while they were frosting cupcakes together, about her rough childhood in Texas, a mother lost to illness, a father who remarried a woman who never loved her. I'll treat you like my own mom, Emily had whispered, eyes glistening over the mixing bowl. Linda reached out and squeezed her hand. Then we'll be mother and daughter in our hearts, she said. Those words replayed in Linda's mind for months afterward. She hung a framed photo of Daniel and Emily on her mantel, next to Bill's portrait, and told her friends at church, I finally have a daughter. When neighbors asked about the wedding, she beamed, Emily's an angel. We're so lucky. But as the months of planning went by, beneath Emily's gentle voice and lavender bouquets, a different plan was forming, one Linda couldn't imagine. Emily had begun quietly making lists with her sister Audrey about how to use Linda's talents. First, they'd have Linda supervise the 20 children who would attend the reception, saving hundreds on babysitting costs. Then, they'd let her handle the decor and flowers, because she loves doing that stuff, at no extra charge. Linda, still glowing from Emily's hugs and compliments, had no idea. She was lost in the picture she had painted of the perfect bride, nurturing it like a delicate rose. For 2 years she had been pouring her recipes, her time, and her trust into Emily, believing every thank you and every shy smile. It never crossed her mind that the young woman she called daughter might be planning to turn her into free help on the very day she thought she would be celebrated as family. It was a breezy Tuesday afternoon in mid-April. The sun had begun to dip low over Ocean Beach, casting a golden light across Linda Cooper's small kitchen. She had a cutting board full of chicken thighs and a pot of tomatoes simmering gently for her homemade salsa verde. The scent of garlic, lime, and roasted chilies floated up as she moved around the kitchen in her faded blue apron, humming an old Fleetwood Mac song. This was her happy place, prepping food for the people she loved. Through the open window she could hear the crash of waves in the distance, mingling with faint laughter from the backyard. She assumed it was just Emily on the phone with a friend. The young woman often stepped out there to chat while Linda cooked. Smiling, Linda wiped her hands on a towel, ready to go out and offer her some iced tea. Then she froze. She heard her own name, Aunt Linda, followed by a burst of laughter. The tone was wrong. Linda leaned slightly closer to the window without meaning to. Outside, on the little patio where Bill's old Adirondack chairs still stood, Emily sat cross-legged with her phone propped up against a planter, chatting on FaceTime with her cousin Sarah in Houston. Emily's voice was bright and confident, not the shy tone she used around Linda. Don't worry about a thing, Emily was saying, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. On the wedding day, I'm going to have Aunt Linda watch all the kids. She's used to looking after patients, so kids will be nothing. Sarah's laugh rang out through the speaker. Girl, you're a genius. Maybe she'll even set the tables for you. Linda's fingers tightened around the kitchen knife until her knuckles whitened. A slow, heavy thud began in her chest. Did I hear that right? Surely I misunderstood. But Emily's next words cut through any doubt. That way we save a ton on babysitters. And with her doing the buffet, we don't even need to hire a caterer, she said matter-of-factly, glancing at her nails. Linda felt her stomach drop. She put the knife down carefully, afraid her trembling hands might slip. She pressed a palm flat against the countertop, trying to steady herself. The kitchen that had felt warm and safe a minute ago now seemed too small, the salsa smell suddenly sharp. On the patio, Emily giggled. Seriously, Sarah, this wedding is going to be perfect. We've got a free babysitter, free decor, free food. Daniel says his mom loves doing this stuff anyway. Sarah's voice came through again, half teasing. Well, I hope she knows what she's signed up for. Linda backed away from the window, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She took off her apron and sat down heavily at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood. Her mind replayed every smile, every bouquet of lavender, every "you're like a mom to me," Emily had said. All of it now felt like a rehearsed performance leading to this moment. She whispered to herself, how could she, but no one answered. For the first time in months, her hands, steady hands that had cared for hundreds of patients, trembled. Out in the yard, Emily kept laughing and planning, unaware that the woman she called mom was sitting just inside, hearing every word and feeling each one like a blade. Linda stood frozen in the middle of her small Ocean Beach kitchen. The knife she had been using to dice cilantro lay on the cutting board, still dotted with green flecks. The smell of roasted peppers filled the air, but she couldn't taste or smell anything anymore. Her ears rang. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt as though the whole house could hear it. She could still see Emily in her mind, sitting on the patio, hair shining in the sunlight, smiling into her phone as she casually said, "She's used to patience, kids will be nothing." Those words rolled around in Linda's head like pebbles in a tin can. The same young woman who had once held her hands in the kitchen and whispered, "I think of you as my own mom," had just called her free labor. Linda lowered herself into the wooden chair at the table, gripping its edge. How could she murmured under her breath. She thought about all the weekends Emily had come down with bread and lavender, all the recipes she had shared, all the nights she'd stayed up designing menus for their wedding. She thought of Daniel, her only son, the boy she'd raised on night shifts, the boy she'd taught to ride a bike on the very street outside this house. Did he know? Did he approve of this plan? Her vision blurred. She saw in her mind the wedding day as Emily apparently imagined it, guests laughing under string lights, music playing, Daniel and Emily dancing in the center, and Linda in some corner of the hall, trying to corral 20 screaming children with no help, no thanks, no chance to even sit down and eat a slice of the cake she had baked. She pictured herself wiping spills, tying shoelaces, while people complimented the beautiful buffet without knowing she hadn't even had a bite. Her stomach twisted with humiliation. A tear slid down her cheek, but she brushed it away roughly. No, she whispered, not like this. Linda had lived 68 years. She had buried her husband. She had pulled double shifts at Scripps Mercy, holding strangers' hands as they slipped away, keeping calm when alarms went off in the ICU at 3 a.m. She had never been called free help. And she wasn't going to start now. She inhaled deeply, like she used to before walking into a trauma room. Stay calm, Linda, she told herself. If you want to save yourself, you have to be calm. Her hands stopped trembling. She folded the dish towel carefully and set it on the counter. The anger was still there, but it was cooling into something sharper, resolve. She looked at the notebook of wedding plans on the counter, its pages filled with her neat handwriting. She closed it slowly, as if closing a chapter. Out loud, to the empty kitchen, she said, "Daniel Cooper, my sweet boy, you're going to learn something about your mother you never knew." Her voice was steady, almost gentle. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and began washing her hands at the sink, the water running warm over her fingers. Outside, Emily's laughter still drifted in from the patio. Inside, a new plan was beginning to take shape, not a plan of revenge, but of self-respect. That night the sky over Ocean Beach was a deep indigo, and a cool wind came in from the sea. Linda sat at her kitchen table under the soft yellow glow of the overhead lamp. Her notebook of wedding plans lay open, pages filled with menus, timelines, and sketches of centerpieces. Her hands were still sticky from chopping vegetables earlier, but she hadn't moved to wash them. She was staring at nothing when her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Hey Mom," his voice came through the speaker, warm and casual. "How's the buffet coming along? Everything on track?" Linda swallowed hard and forced her voice into a smile. "Everything's perfect, sweetheart. Don't worry about a thing." That's my mom, Daniel chuckled. Emily keeps saying how lucky we are. Linda glanced at the screen and saw a new message pop up from Emily. Thank you so much, Ms. Linda. You're a lifesaver. We couldn't do this without you. Heart emojis filled the text. Linda's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She typed no problem and added a little smiley face. Outwardly, she was the same helpful mother she'd always been. Inside, a storm was building. She set the phone down and reached for her landline, the one only old friends used. She dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. Marjorie's residence, came the cheerful drawl. Marge, it's me, Linda said, her voice low but steady. I need to tell you something. She heard the scrape of a chair on the other end. Linda? What's wrong? I just found out, Linda whispered, glancing toward the darkened backyard window as if someone might hear. Emily's been planning to make me babysit 20 kids at the wedding. And do the decor. For free. Like I'm some kind of staff. There was a sharp intake of breath. You're kidding, Marjorie said. After all you've done? I wish I were. I heard her talking to her cousin. Laughing about how much money they're saving. Linda's voice trembled. Marge, I don't even know. Used. On the other end, Marjorie's tone hardened. Linda, you can't let them do this. You've been bending over backwards for years. This time you have to stand up for yourself. Linda pressed a hand to her forehead. I know. And I will. But not by shouting or fighting. I'm going to stay silent until the very last minute. There was a pause. Then Marjorie said softly, that's the nurse in you talking. Calm under pressure. Linda allowed herself a small laugh. Maybe so. But I'm done being their free help. They're going to learn something. For the next few nights, her kitchen turned into a war room. She cooked as usual, testing recipes, making lists, but beside her notebook of menus there was another list now, names of vendors to cancel, deposits she was willing to lose, alternative plans for her own weekend. She hummed while she chopped onions, but her mind was clear, calculating. Each stroke of her pen on the cancellation list felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. By the 3rd night she knew exactly what she would do. If they want to treat me like staff, she thought, folding a stack of napkins, then they'll have to see what happens when the staff doesn't show up. It wasn't revenge. It was a lesson in respect, one she should have taught long ago. She turned off the kitchen light, stood at the window looking out at the dark ocean, and whispered, they'll find out soon enough. Friday morning dawned bright and cool over San Diego. A soft marine layer still hung above Ocean Beach as Linda Cooper pulled on her favorite cream cardigan and grabbed her purse. She slipped the small spiral notebook of wedding plans into her bag, not because she needed it anymore, but because holding it felt like holding the weight she was about to put down. She walked out to her old Subaru Forester, its blue paint faded from years of salt air. As she started the engine, the radio clicked on with an old James Taylor song. She drove down I-5 toward downtown San Diego, the skyline glittering ahead. Her hands were steady on the wheel. She thought of Daniel and Emily's big day, of all the nights she'd stayed up planning menus, folding napkins, sewing ribbon onto table runners. Enough, she told herself. Today, I'm taking my life back. Her first stop was a small flower shop on G Street, a place she'd used for years. The owner, Rosa, looked up from behind the counter, her arms full of white lilies. Linda! You're early for pickup, she greeted. Linda exhaled. Actually, Rosa, I'm here to cancel my order. Rosa blinked. Cancel? But the wedding. I know, Linda interrupted gently. I'm paying the cancellation fee. I just won't be needing the arrangements anymore. Rosa hesitated, then nodded slowly. Are you sure? Linda forced a small smile. I'm sure. She handed over her credit card and signed the slip. Her hands felt lighter as she left, even though her bank account would be lighter too. Next she stopped by a little event supply shop where she'd ordered the centerpieces. The young clerk recognized her instantly. "Ms. Cooper, your centerpieces are ready for pickup on Tuesday." Linda shook her head. "Sweetheart, go ahead and restock them. I'm canceling." "Keep the deposit." The clerk's eyes widened. "Oh, okay." Linda turned before anyone could ask further questions. Outside, the sun had burned away the fog. She tilted her face up to the light and felt the first real breath of relief she'd had in weeks. Her final stop was a tiny office above a taco shop where she'd booked a mariachi trio. The bandleader, a man named Miguel, frowned as she explained. "Señora, we were looking forward to playing," he said. "I know, Miguel." "I'm sorry," Linda said sincerely. "Please take the penalty fee. But I won't be needing music that night." He studied her for a moment and then extended his hand. "Sometimes you have to do what's right for you," he said simply. By noon, Linda parked her Subaru outside the Better Buzz Coffee in Hillcrest. Inside, Marjorie was already at a corner table with 2 lattes. She stood and hugged Linda hard. "You're pale as a ghost, friend. Sit down." Linda slid into the chair, feeling the warmth of the mug between her palms. "It's done," she said quietly. "Flowers, centerpieces, the band, all cancelled." Marjorie reached across and squeezed her arm. "Linda, you're doing the right thing. This isn't revenge. This is dignity." Linda's lips trembled but she smiled. "It feels like I can breathe again." That evening, back at her little house by the ocean, Linda pulled her old blue suitcase from the closet. She laid it open on the bed, smoothing the lining with her hand. One by one, she packed a few soft blouses, her blood pressure medicine, her favorite sandals, and finally the sea blue dress she loved, the one Bill used to say brought out her eyes. She set a framed photo of her late husband on the nightstand and touched it with her fingertips. "I'm going to take care of myself this weekend, Bill," she whispered. "Just like you always told me to." As she zipped up the suitcase, the house felt different, not empty, but lighter, as if it too had exhaled. For the first time in a long time, Linda wasn't preparing for someone else. She was preparing for herself. Saturday morning broke clear and golden over San Diego. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window of Linda Cooper's small house, falling across the wooden table where a single envelope lay neatly in the center. Inside was a letter written in her careful cursive on cream stationery. She had placed it there at dawn, next to a mug of coffee Daniel had left behind the last time he visited. The house smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets she'd tucked into her packed suitcase. Linda zipped up the last pocket of her old blue suitcase and set it by the door. She took one last look around the kitchen, the tiled countertops, the collection of ceramic mugs, the little photo of Daniel at age 7 holding a sandcastle trophy. Her heart squeezed, but she didn't falter. She smoothed her cardigan, picked up her purse, and stepped out into the cool morning air. A white Honda pulled up to the curb. Marjorie, her friend of 35 years, leaned across the seat to roll down the window. "Well, look at you," she called out with a grin. "You're glowing already." Linda laughed, sliding into the passenger seat. "Freedom looks good on me, huh?" They drove north on the I-15, leaving the city behind. The freeway opened into wide desert views dotted with wind turbines. Linda held a cappuccino from a roadside cafe, the foam brushing her lip as she sipped. "I've traded $4,500 of buffet for a weekend of hot springs and massages," she said, raising her cup like a toast. Marjorie tapped the steering wheel, chuckling. "That's the Linda Cooper I know. Not some unpaid wedding planner." They reached Palm Springs just before noon. The sun blazed overhead, glinting off the glassy facade of the Two Bunch Palms Spa Resort. Date palms lined the driveway, the air smelled of warm sand and citrus blossoms. As they parked, Linda felt a ripple of anticipation, not guilt, not fear, just anticipation. Inside the resort lobby, cool air and the scent of eucalyptus enveloped them. A young receptionist handed them spa robes and mineral water with lemon slices. "Welcome, ladies," she said with a smile. "Your hot spring soak and massage are scheduled for 2 o'clock. Marjorie elbowed her gently. "Listen to that. We have a schedule, but it's for us." Linda laughed softly, her shoulders loosening. "I almost forgot what that felt like." Before leaving San Diego that morning, she had slipped the handwritten letter into an envelope and set it on the kitchen table for Daniel. She could see the words in her mind as if reading them aloud. "My dear son, I love you. But I am not a free babysitter. The buffet has been cancelled. Enjoy your wedding in your own way. I will be enjoying my weekend in mine." As they walked toward their bungalow at the spa, Marjorie asked, "Are you sure you're ready for whatever fallout comes?" Linda looked out at the shimmering hot springs, at the desert stretching endless and bright. "For the first time in months, I'm not afraid," she said. "I've done my part. Now it's time for them to do theirs." Marjorie squeezed her shoulder. "That's my girl." And for the first time in weeks, Linda Cooper felt light, not like someone's mother or caretaker or unpaid help, but like a woman reclaiming her own life. At 11 a.m. the desert sun over Palm Springs shimmered like gold foil. Linda Cooper was waist-deep in the warm mineral pool at Two Bunch Palm Spa, steam curling up around her face. She leaned back against the edge, eyes closed, feeling the gentle swirl of the water around her legs. The faint scent of eucalyptus drifted from the nearby sauna, and somewhere behind her Marjorie was laughing with a spa attendant about which facial mask to try next. Linda's phone, resting on a white towel by the pool, began to vibrate. Once, twice, then again and again. The sound was jarring in the serene space. She opened her eyes, reached for it, and saw the screen lit up. 12 missed calls, Daniel. Beneath that, 5 missed calls, Emily. New messages were already flashing. She swiped open the first one. "Mom, guests are here. Where's the food? The kids are crying, we don't know what to do." Another popped up right after. "Mrs. Linda, please come back right now. We can't handle 20 kids." The texts were frantic, full of exclamation marks, even a few crying emojis. Linda felt her heart tighten for a second, but then she inhaled deeply. She remembered the nights in the ICU when alarms would blare and she had to steady her hands to save a life. That same calm now settled over her like a familiar blanket. She typed slowly, her thumbs deliberate on the screen. "Daniel, I'm at the spa in Palm Springs. I'm enjoying my weekend just as you're enjoying your wedding. Everything now is for you two to decide." She hit send and set the phone back on the towel. It buzzed again, but she didn't pick it up. Instead, she slid deeper into the mineral water until it reached her shoulders. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle gurgle of the fountain and the distant hum of desert cicadas. Marjorie approached, wrapped in a robe, holding 2 glasses of cucumber water. "Another emergency?" she asked softly. Linda opened one eye, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You could say that," she murmured. Apparently 20 kids and no food is not as easy as they thought. Marjorie chuckled and handed her the drink. "And here you are, soaking like a queen." Linda took a sip of the cool water, feeling the contrast between it and the hot spring. "First time in years I'm not the one fixing everything," she said quietly. The phone buzzed again. She didn't even look. She let the sound fade into the background of trickling water and rustling palms. Around her, other guests chatted in low tones, the desert breeze lifting strands of her silver hair. For the first time in decades, Linda felt utterly untethered, no shifts to cover, no casseroles to deliver, no one expecting her to pick up the pieces. She tilted her head back and looked up at the vast blue sky, her heart lighter with every breath. "I'm free," she whispered, more to herself than to Marjorie. Finally free. Marjorie clinked her glass gently against Linda's. Here's to your freedom, darling. Linda smiled, the sunlight glinting off the water, and for the first time in many years she wasn't thinking about anyone else's happiness. She was simply living her own. By late afternoon, the sky above Palm Springs had softened into shades of peach and gold. Linda and Marjorie were sitting under a cluster of date palms at the spa's outdoor lounge, sipping herbal tea after their massages. The mineral water still clung to Linda's skin, making her feel lighter, almost reborn. Her phone sat face down on the table, silent for a blessed moment. Then it started buzzing again, a long, insistent vibration that made the tea in her cup ripple. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "Round two?" she asked softly. Linda picked up the phone and saw Daniel's name flashing. She sighed, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello, sweetheart." Her son's voice came through tense, rushed, almost pleading. "Mom, please. I'll pay you $1,000 if you come back and handle the kids. We can't control them. The caterer's gone, people are upset. We need you." Linda closed her eyes for a moment. She could hear music and children crying faintly in the background of the call. She pictured Daniel in his wedding suit, hair mussed, looking panicked. Her heart pinched, but she stayed steady. "Daniel," she said gently, "this isn't about money. You never once asked me if I wanted to do all that work. You just assumed." There was a pause. Then a different voice cut in, Emily's, sharp and brittle. "You're being selfish, Mrs. Linda. You're ruining our wedding." Linda sat up straighter, her tone still calm but firmer now. "Emily," she said, "you once called me Mom. You stood in my kitchen and told me I was like family. Yet today, you're treating me like a staff member. I'm not ruining your wedding. I'm simply taking back my right to choose." On the other end, there was sudden silence. The music and chatter faded as if someone had muted the room. Linda stared out at the desert horizon, the sand, the wind turbines, the endless sky, feeling no shame, only a quiet strength. Marjorie reached over and squeezed her arm. "You okay?" she whispered. Linda turned to her friend and smiled, a soft but genuine smile. "For the first time," she said quietly, "I feel at peace. I'm letting them learn their own lesson." The phone remained silent. Then Daniel's voice came back, softer, almost bewildered. "Mom. I didn't realize. I'm sorry." But Linda could hear Emily in the background, still muttering angrily. She said only, "I love you, Daniel. But I'm not your free babysitter. Today, this is your wedding. Make it what you will." Then she tapped the red button and set the phone down. The breeze rustled the palm fronds above them. Marjorie handed her another sip of tea. "Here's to your peace, Linda," she said. Linda looked up at the sky, inhaled deeply, and let the last bit of guilt drift away like the desert wind. For the first time in decades, she had chosen herself, and it felt like freedom. That evening, the desert sky above Palm Springs blazed with streaks of rose and gold before softening into a deep lavender twilight. From the wooden deck outside their suite at Two Bunch Palms, Linda and Marjorie sat side by side in wicker chairs, wrapped in soft spa robes. The smell of warm mineral water and creosote drifted up from the springs below. A faint breeze stirred the tall palm fronds, making them whisper like old friends sharing secrets. Linda cradled a glass of deep red Cabernet in her hands, feeling its warmth seep into her palms. She stared out at the jagged silhouette of the Joshua Tree Mountains glowing under the last light. For a long time, neither woman spoke. Finally, Linda exhaled, her voice low but steady. "Marge, do you know what I realized today? The harder I tried to be the perfect mother-in-law, the easier it was for them to treat me like I was invisible." Marjorie turned to look at her friend, her eyes soft. "I've watched you, Linda," she said. "You've bent over backwards for that boy and his fiancée. Cooked, decorated, babysat, smiled through every demand. And still, they forgot you're a person. That's not on you. That's on them." Linda let out a small, rueful laugh. I thought if I just gave more, if I kept saying yes, they'd see how much I loved them. But all it did was teach them I had no limits. She swirled the wine, watching the reflection of the first stars tremble on the surface. Tonight, for the first time in years, I don't feel small. Her phone, resting on the little table between them, blinked with notifications. Curious, Marjorie leaned over. You're popular, she teased. Linda unlocked it. Text after text scrolled up from numbers she knew by heart, neighbors from Ocean Beach, old co-workers from the hospital, even a few parents of Daniel's friends who had been at the wedding that day. One message read, Linda, you did the right thing. We were shocked at how they treated you. Another, proud of you. Not many women your age would stand up like that. Linda blinked hard, feeling a knot rise in her throat. She had expected silence, maybe judgment. Instead, here was validation, flowing in from every corner of her life. She set the phone down and looked at Marjorie, eyes shining. For 2 years I've been acting like the woman who had to earn her place in her own family. Tonight, I feel like a woman who belongs to herself again. Marjorie reached over, squeezing her knee. This, she said, nodding at the starlit desert, this is the real Linda Cooper. The one who laughs, who takes trips, who remembers she matters. Linda tilted her head back, gazing at the vast Palm Springs sky now dusted with countless stars. She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, this is my life. Finally, this is my life. The night air wrapped around her like a soft blanket. For the first time in years, Linda didn't feel like someone's employee, someone's mother, someone's stand-in. She felt like herself, a 68-year-old woman who had raised a son, survived loss, and was still capable of choosing her own freedom. The wine tasted richer. The silence felt like music. And deep inside, a new kind of strength took root. After Daniel's last frantic phone call faded into silence, Linda turned her iPhone face down on the nightstand and tapped it into airplane mode. The spa room smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the steam they'd just had, and the muted gurgle of the mineral spring outside drifted through the cracked window. For a moment she simply sat there, palms on her knees, letting her pulse slow. The screen was still lit with missed calls and notifications, but she wasn't ready to pick it up yet. Marjorie came out of the bathroom in a fluffy white robe, hair wrapped in a towel like a turban. You okay? She asked softly. I think so, Linda said, voice a little shaky but steadier than it had been in weeks. I'm just not used to ignoring Daniel. She gave a rueful smile. Sometimes ignoring is the healthiest thing you can do, Marjorie said, lowering herself onto the edge of the bed. When Linda finally unlocked the phone, she didn't open the messages from Daniel. Instead, on impulse, she opened Facebook. A bright red dot glowed over her messenger icon. She tapped it. The first message was from Mary Collins, her old neighbor from Ocean Beach. Linda, I saw a clip someone posted of the wedding livestream. I can't believe how they treated you. I'm so sorry. You're amazing for standing your ground. Linda blinked at the words, her thumb hovering over the screen. She hadn't expected anyone outside the immediate family to even notice. Another message popped up from Joe Ramirez, a respiratory therapist she'd worked alongside for 15 years at Scripps Mercy. Saw the drama at Daniel's wedding through mutual friends. You did the right thing. Proud of you. And then a third notification, Rosa Gutierrez, the vivacious Mexican cook she used to trade recipes with at the hospital cafeteria. Hermana, you taught them a priceless lesson. Respect is earned. I'm cheering for you. Linda let out a laugh, small at first, then bigger, and held the phone out to Marjorie. Look at this, she said, scrolling through the messages. I thought maybe I was overreacting, that I was losing it. But look. People are actually on my side. Marjorie glanced at the screen and grinned. You're not crazy, honey. You're brave. And people recognize it. Linda felt something inside her loosen. All day she'd been a cocktail of guilt, anger, and determination, but these small, glowing words from people she respected felt like hands on her shoulders, steadying her. She could almost hear their voices, the clink of coffee cups from break rooms, the ocean breeze from her old street, little pieces of her life affirming she wasn't alone. She walked over to the sliding glass door, pulled it open, and stepped out onto the terrace. Palm Springs spread below, a scatter of lights against the dark desert floor, mountains rising like sentinels beyond. The air was warm but dry, with the faint scent of creosote and dust. Marjorie followed her out, bringing 2 glasses of red wine. "To freedom," she said, handing one over. Linda took it, the glass cool in her hand. "To freedom," she echoed, clinking lightly. They sank into the cushioned chairs. Linda tucked her feet under her, robe brushing her ankles. "You know," she murmured, looking at the city lights twinkling like fallen stars, "all those vibrations I used to dread, texts, calls, demands, they sound different now. Like background music instead of alarms." Marjorie chuckled. "Exactly. You're hearing your life in a new key." Linda tilted her head back, letting the desert wind play with her silver hair. "For the first time in a long time," she said softly, "I don't feel like the villain. I feel like myself." She scrolled through the messages one more time, pressing her thumb over each little heart and prayer emoji people had sent. It felt like a community she hadn't realized she had. And as the phone vibrated again with another notification, she didn't rush to answer. She simply smiled, sipped her wine, and listened to the hum of the springs below, the soundtrack of a woman reclaiming her freedom. By 11 o'clock that night, the mineral pools at the resort were quiet and the soft desert wind had cooled. Linda sat cross-legged on the wide wicker chair of their private terrace, a plush spa robe wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was still damp from the evening soak, smelling faintly of lavender shampoo. In front of her, the lights of Palm Springs blinked lazily like fireflies. Marjorie was inside the room, humming along with the television, but Linda stayed outside, staring at her phone lying screen down on the little table. She had ignored it for hours, but curiosity finally won. With a small sigh she picked it up. As soon as she unlocked the screen, the flood hit, dozens of notifications stacked on top of each other. She tapped the first one from Daniel. "Mom, the wedding is a disaster. Kids broke the decorations, Emily is completely stressed out." "I'm sorry, Mom." Linda exhaled slowly. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard but she didn't reply yet. She swiped to the next message, from Emily. "You ruined my special day. Do you know what you've done?" The words glared back at her in harsh capitals. Linda's chest tightened, not with anger but with a deep, dull ache. She could picture Emily in her white gown, mascara smudged, phone clutched in her manicured hand. Then another notification popped up from Daniel, sent a few minutes later. "Mom, I thought you loved me." That one went straight to her heart. She closed her eyes, resting the phone against her lips for a moment. All at once memories of bedtime stories, science fair projects, long shifts at the hospital to pay for Daniel's college flickered through her mind. She did love him, fiercely. But love wasn't servitude. Marjorie appeared at the sliding door holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "Well?" she asked softly. Linda showed her the screen. "Look at this," she murmured. Marjorie read the messages, then squeezed Linda's shoulder. "Write what you really feel. Not anger. Truth." Linda nodded. Her fingers began to type slowly, deliberately. "Daniel, it's precisely because I love you that I will not allow you to treat me like an employee." She stared at the words for a long moment, then hit send. The message left with a soft whoosh. Marjorie peered over her shoulder. "Perfect," she said. Almost immediately another text arrived from Emily, full of exclamation marks. "We're moving back to Texas. You'll never see us again." Linda's hands didn't shake this time. She typed calmly. "That's your decision. But know this, someone who truly loves you does not use punishment as a weapon." She set the phone down, screen glowing in the dark like a tiny campfire, and reached for her tea. The chamomile was warm and sweet. Marjorie sank into the chair opposite her. "You okay?" Linda leaned back, head resting against the wicker, eyes fixed on the stars pricking the desert sky. "For the first time in years," she said quietly, "I'm more than okay." Inside, the muted TV played an old movie. Outside, the hot spring bubbled softly. The phone vibrated again, but Linda didn't pick it up. She let it buzz like distant thunder while she and Marjorie sat in the stillness, sipping tea, two old friends under the palm-lined night, a mother who had finally drawn her line and was breathing in the freedom she had just claimed. On Sunday morning, the first rays of California's sunlight slipped through the slats of the white wooden shutters and painted soft golden stripes across the spa room floor. Linda opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the brightness. For a moment she wasn't sure where she was. Then the scent of eucalyptus oil and the faint sound of water trickling through the resort's garden fountains reminded her, Palm Springs, 2 bunch palms, freedom. She lay still, listening. No phone buzzing on the nightstand. No voices calling her name. Only the distant coo of morning doves and the gentle rush of the hot springs beyond the window. She rolled over and glanced at her phone. A blank screen. Not a single notification since midnight. She exhaled a long, quiet breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Marjorie stirred in the other bed, pushing aside her blanket. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice rough from sleep. "Morning," Linda replied, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. The carpet was soft under her bare feet, a small luxury she noticed with gratitude. She hadn't felt this rested in years. There had been no anxious dreams, no mental checklist of chores for other people. Just deep, uninterrupted sleep. As she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, she caught her own reflection, the lines around her eyes, the silver streaks in her hair, but instead of fatigue she saw something new, steadiness. "This is me," she whispered to herself, a smile tugging at her lips. They dressed casually, Linda in a linen shirt and wide straw hat, Marjorie in a bright sundress. Together they strolled down the palm-lined path to the resort's open-air dining terrace. The morning buffet was laid out on long tables, fresh fruit glistening with dew, baskets of croissants, steaming carafes of coffee. Linda filled her plate slowly, savoring the smell of warm bread and roasted peppers. Marjorie sat across from her, sipping orange juice. "You look 10 years younger," she teased. Linda laughed, a light, genuine sound. "I feel 10 years younger." They ate in companionable silence for a while, listening to the clink of cutlery and the murmur of other guests. Then Linda set down her fork, eyes bright. "Marge, you know what? I'm going to New York. I'm finally going to see a Broadway show. Hamilton, Wicked, I don't care which. I'm going." Marjorie's eyebrows shot up, then she grinned. "About time. Daniel can hire a babysitter if he needs one." Linda chuckled, shaking her head. The remark felt like a closing chapter, a punctuation mark on years of putting herself last. She took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "It's funny," she said softly. "I kept thinking sacrifice would make people love me more. Turns out, it just made me invisible." Marjorie reached across the table, covering Linda's hand with her own. "Not anymore," she said simply. Linda gazed out at the blue sky over the desert, the palms swaying gently, the sound of water trickling like a quiet applause. For the first time in decades she wasn't planning her day around someone else's needs. No grocery lists, no party favors, no silent resentments. Only the wide, open space of her own choices. She took a deep breath and smiled at Marjorie. "New York first," she said. "Then maybe Italy." "Why not?" Marjorie raised her glass of juice. "To new beginnings." Linda clinked her coffee cup against it. "To new beginnings," she echoed, feeling the words settle inside her like a promise. The morning sunlight touched her face, warm and forgiving. Somewhere, her phone lay silent. Somewhere else, Daniel and Emily were probably cleaning up the chaos, maybe thinking about what had happened. But here, in this moment, Linda was free, a woman awakening to her own life at last. By midday on Monday, the familiar smell of salt and blooming jasmine drifted through the open windows of Linda's little house in Ocean Beach. She had just returned from Palm Springs, the long drive down I-10 leaving a soft hum in her ears. Her Subaru sat in the driveway dusted with desert sand. Inside, the rooms felt almost strange, the same wicker chairs, the same framed photos of Daniel at different ages, the same kitchen with its faded blue tiles, but everything seemed quieter, larger, as if the walls themselves were breathing differently. She placed her overnight bag by the door and kicked off her sandals. Before even unpacking, she reached for her phone. 3 unread messages from Daniel glowed on the screen. She tapped the first one. "Mom, maybe I was wrong." The second, "Emily and I have been talking. We need to change how we treat you." And the third, simply, "I'm sorry." Linda's thumb hovered over the keyboard. For a moment she considered replying, but then she set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The house was silent except for the distant hiss of the ocean. She filled the kettle, the sound of water echoing softly in the empty kitchen, and set it on the stove. As the mint tea steeped, she stood at the window looking out at her rose garden. Pink and yellow blooms bent gently in the breeze, petals catching sunlight like small stained glass windows. She wrapped her hands around the warm mud and, almost to herself, murmured, "Love doesn't mean saying yes forever. Sometimes love is teaching someone how to accept no." She heard her own voice in the quiet kitchen and realized she had spoken out loud. It felt good. Her phone buzzed again, a call from Marjorie. Linda answered on speaker, setting the mug down. "Back home safe?" Marjorie's voice crackled cheerfully. "Yes," Linda said, glancing at the still-packed bag. "It feels different here, Marge. Like my house is bigger somehow." Marjorie chuckled. "Maybe it's you who's bigger now." Linda smiled, taking a slow sip of tea. "You know," she said softly, "our generation of women was taught that our worth was measured in sacrifice." "I know," Marjorie replied. "But you're showing your son something else now. Boundaries. Self-respect." Linda leaned her forehead against the cool windowpane, looking at the roses. "It's strange. I thought if I just kept giving, he'd love me more. But it only made me disappear." "Not anymore," Marjorie said firmly. "You planted a seed this weekend. Give it time to grow." They talked a little longer about trivial things, books they wanted to read, a new cafe opening on Newport Avenue. When the call ended, Linda wandered into the living room. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards. The silence wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. She lowered herself into her favorite old wooden armchair, the one with the floral cushion she'd sewn years ago. The chair creaked a little as if greeting her back. She set the mug on the armrest and exhaled slowly, a long breath that felt like it was coming from deep inside her chest. For the first time she felt the weight truly lift, as though invisible strings had been cut. In her lap lay the phone with Daniel's messages still unanswered. She didn't rush. She simply sat, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeam, feeling the house settle around her like a safe cocoon. Outside, a gull cried and the breeze carried the scent of roses through the screen door. Linda closed her eyes and whispered, "This is what freedom smells like." And for a few minutes more she just breathed, tea cooling beside her, letting the new quiet root itself inside her like a seed ready to grow. That Tuesday afternoon, the late sunlight poured into Linda's small living room in Ocean Beach, casting warm squares on the wooden floor and the worn floral couch. The smell of salt air drifted in from the open window, mingling with the faint scent of lemon polish she had used on the coffee table that morning. She was sitting in her favorite chair, a mug of mint tea cooling between her hands, when she heard the knock on the door, slow, hesitant, almost apologetic. She stood up, smoothing the front of her soft cotton blouse, and opened the door. Daniel was there, alone. His usually crisp dress shirt was wrinkled and untucked, his hair a little mussed as if he had been running his hands through it all day. He kept his eyes on the porch floorboards. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hi, Con," she answered, her voice even, almost gentle. She stepped aside and gestured him in. They sat facing each other in the living room. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The only sound was the muted crash of waves a few blocks away and the faint ticking of the old wall clock above the mantel. Daniel clasped his hands together, knuckles white, staring at them as though the right words might be hiding there. Finally, he drew in a breath. "Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't think everything would turn out this way. I didn't think," his voice broke and he swallowed. "Emily, she's been in shock since I told her what I'd overheard you hearing us say to Sarah." Linda watched him quietly, her eyes steady but not hard. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but clear, "do you realize you treated me like an employee? Like someone you could assign work to without asking?" Daniel's shoulders slumped. He looked up at her for the first time, eyes wet. "Yes, Mom. I see it now. I'm ashamed." She nodded once, still calm. Inside, her heart hurt, but there was also a strange steadiness she had never felt before. "It's not just about the wedding," she continued, setting her mug down on the table. "For 2 years, you've assumed I would always be there, always available, no matter what." Daniel pressed his palms against his knees. "I know. I thought," he exhaled, shaking his head. Dad would be turning over in his grave if he saw how I've treated you." Linda's eyes softened at the mention of her late husband. She reached out and rested a hand on her son's arm. "Your father loved us both, Daniel. But love doesn't mean giving until you vanish. I lost myself trying to be the perfect mother-in-law. I can't do that anymore." Daniel nodded slowly, his lips trembling. "I've been selfish. I just wanted everything to be perfect. I didn't see what it was doing to you." They sat like that for a while, the air between them heavy but clearing, like a storm finally breaking. Outside, a seagull called. Inside, Linda felt something shift. Her son was still the boy she had raised, but for the first time he looked like a man beginning to understand. "I'm listening now, Mom," he said quietly. Linda gave a small, sad smile. "Good," she replied. "Because this isn't about punishment. It's about respect. And it starts here." Daniel nodded again, eyes down, but this time it wasn't avoidance, it was humility. And in the dimming light of the Ocean Beach afternoon, mother and son began to rebuild what had cracked. The sun had dipped lower over Ocean Beach by the time their conversation turned serious again. The living room glowed a soft amber from the fading light, the kind of light that softened everything but left no shadows to hide behind. Linda sat upright in her armchair, her hands folded loosely in her lap, but her eyes were steady and clear. Daniel sat opposite on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, as if bracing himself. She took a slow breath, feeling the weight of years of unspoken expectations pressing up against the moment. "Daniel," she began, her voice calm but firm, "from now on, things have to change." He looked up, his brows drawn together. "I know, Mom." "No," she said gently, shaking her head, "I need you to hear me." She leaned forward a little, her hands resting on her knees now. "If you want to ask me for help with something, you must ask, not assume. You must ask if I want to do it. I'm a guest at family events, not staff, not a free babysitter or a cook. I have the right to say no without feeling guilty." Daniel swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and finally nodded. "I understand, Mom. I really do." Linda studied his face, looking for traces of the boy she had raised. She could see shame there, but also something new, an openness she hadn't seen before. "Good," she said quietly. Then, after a pause, she added, "and there's something else." He shifted uncomfortably. "What?" She held his gaze. "The next time Emily speaks badly about me, you must defend me. You are her husband, but you are also my son. I won't be silent while my dignity is stripped away." Daniel's eyes flickered, and he looked down at his hands. For a long moment he said nothing, only rubbed his thumb over his wedding ring. Finally, he whispered, "I should have done that from the beginning. I should have protected you." The room was quiet except for the faint creak of the old clock. Outside, a gull cried somewhere over the ocean. Linda felt a surprising tenderness rise up under her sternness. She reached out, laying her hand lightly on his arm. "I love you, Daniel," she said softly. "But forgiveness comes from actions, not just words." He looked up at her then, and she could see his eyes glisten. "I will show you," he said. "I promise I'll prove it." They sat like that for a few beats, the air between them not quite heavy but solid, like a bridge being built plank by plank. For the first time in years, Linda felt her son sitting across from her not as a boy who expected, but as a man who was learning to respect. She leaned back into her chair, exhaling a long, quiet breath. This, she thought, is what boundaries feel like. The light outside dimmed to a dusky pink, and somewhere a neighbor's wind chimes rang softly. In that humble living room, without any formal papers, a new contract had been signed, not in ink, but in words, understanding, and a mother's steady insistence on dignity. The next morning, the coastal fog rolled in off the Pacific, softening the outlines of Linda's little bungalow in Ocean Beach. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries faint through the morning mist. Linda had just finished watering her rose bushes, still in her faded denim shirt and sandals, when she heard a knock at the front door, sharp at first, then softer, as if the visitor's courage was wavering. She wiped her damp hands on a towel and opened the door. Emily stood there. Gone were the flawless curls, the pastel dress, the high heels Linda had always seen her wear. Instead, she wore jeans, a plain t-shirt, and her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders drawn inward, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. "Emily," Linda said quietly. "Hi," Emily's voice was thin. Can I come in?" Linda stepped aside. "Of course." Inside, Emily perched on the very edge of the sofa, knees together, twisting a tissue between her fingers. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and sea air. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, cutting pale lines across Emily's trembling hands. "I wanted to say," Emily began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry. For everything." Her voice cracked. "I've never had a mother-in-law before. My own mother died when I was 9. My stepmother," she gave a small, bitter laugh, "never loved me. When I met you, Mrs. Linda, I didn't know how to act. I was scared. And jealous. You and Daniel are so close." Linda sat across from her in the armchair, fingers laced, her face calm but unreadable. "Emily," she said gently but firmly, "does that give you the right to treat me like an employee?" Emily's head dropped. "No," she whispered. "No, it doesn't." She pressed the tissue to her eyes. "I didn't even see what I was doing. I felt so insecure, so out of place, and the only way I knew to feel better was to push you down. Make you smaller so I could feel less small myself. I'm ashamed." For the first time, Linda saw real tears sliding down Emily's cheeks, not the dramatic ones she'd glimpsed at rehearsals or in public, but raw, quiet tears. Emily's shoulders shook slightly. "I called you Mom, but I didn't treat you like one," she said. "I treated you like free labor. And that was wrong." Linda took a slow breath, her eyes softening but her posture steady. She thought of all the nights she had stayed up planning menus, all the Saturdays Emily had spent at her kitchen counter laughing and calling her the best cook in San Diego. The contrast hurt. But sitting here now, she also saw not a schemer but a frightened, flawed young woman. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Emily," she said quietly, "I'm not interested in apologies alone. I'm interested in respect. Do you understand?" Emily nodded vigorously, wiping her eyes. "I do. I want to do better." I don't want to be that person anymore. The house was silent except for the distant crash of a wave. Linda sat back slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. In front of her was not the polished bride-to-be she had resented, but a vulnerable 32-year-old trying to unlearn a lifetime of fear. For the first time, Linda allowed herself to believe that change was possible. The afternoon light slanted through the living room blinds, casting long stripes across the carpet. Outside, the sound of waves rolling into Ocean Beach rose and fell like a slow heartbeat. Linda sat in her armchair, her palms resting on her knees, steady but not stiff. Emily sat opposite, still perched on the edge of the couch. Her tissue was crumpled now, makeup smudged faintly under her eyes, but she no longer tried to hide her trembling. Linda broke the silence first. Her voice was quiet but edged with steel. "Emily," she said, "words aren't enough. You'll have to prove what you're saying. I'm giving you a chance, but just one. If you treat me like an employee again, there will not be a second." Emily straightened a little, swallowing hard. "I understand," she whispered. "I've already called Sarah. I told her what happened. I apologized. I explained everything." Linda gave a small nod, but her face didn't soften much. "I don't need Sarah to apologize to me. I don't need anyone's performance. What I need," she said slowly, "is for you to respect me." Emily blinked, absorbing the words. "Thank you, Mrs. Linda, for teaching me this." Linda lifted one eyebrow. "I'm not teaching you a lesson, Emily. I'm demanding my right to be respected. That's different." The younger woman's eyes brimmed again, but this time she didn't look away. "Then tell me," she said earnestly, "what should I do? How can I be a good daughter-in-law to you? Not just for Daniel, but for you?" Linda leaned back, folding her hands. She thought of all the times she'd swallowed her needs, thinking that silence was love. Her voice softened. "It's the same as being a good person," she said. "Respect. Ask before you ask for help. Don't assume. And respect boundaries. It isn't complicated." Emily nodded slowly, almost like a student taking notes. "I want to start over," she said. "Not to make Daniel happy. To have a real, healthy relationship with you." Linda held her gaze for a long moment. She could see the difference, no rehearsed smile, no sugary compliments, just a scared young woman trying to begin again. Finally she exhaled, a little of the tightness leaving her shoulders. "All right," she said simply. "But don't make promises. Show me." Emily's lips parted as if to speak, then she closed them and nodded. "I will," she murmured. The room fell quiet again. Outside, a breeze rattled the wind chimes on the porch, scattering soft notes through the air. Linda felt a faint but undeniable shift, as though the house itself was listening. For the first time in months she didn't feel like a servant in her own family. She felt like a woman setting her own terms. Emily rose from the couch, still clutching the tissue. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Linda didn't smile, but her voice was calm. "We'll see how things go," she said. Actions, not words. As Emily left, the door clicking softly shut behind her, Linda stayed seated, looking at the strip of sunlight on the carpet. The sea breeze carried the scent of roses from her garden. She closed her eyes and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time, rebuilding trust felt possible, but only because she'd learned to protect herself first. 2 weeks drifted by like slow tides along the Ocean Beach shore. In that time Linda's phone remained strangely silent. No last-minute calls for babysitting, no urgent texts asking for favors. At first she interpreted the quiet as a kind of punishment, maybe Daniel and Emily were angry, retreating into silence. But as the days stretched out, she realized something gentler was happening. The absence of requests was not coldness, it was respect. She spent those mornings tending to her rose garden, sipping coffee on the porch while gulls called overhead. In the evening she'd walk along Newport Avenue with Marjorie, stopping at their favorite cafe for clam chowder. For the first time in years, she felt her days belonged to her. On a Friday afternoon, just as the sun dipped low and turned the sea into a sheet of copper, her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. She took a breath and answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice was careful but warmer than she expected. "I wanted to ask you something. It's Emily's birthday next week. I'm planning a surprise party. I've already hired a catering company and booked a space at the little wine bar she loves downtown. I just could use your advice on decorations." Linda blinked in surprise, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Decorations?" she repeated. "Yes," Daniel said quickly. "Just advice, Mom. Nothing heavy. And I'll pay you for your time if it takes a lot." She felt her lips curve into a slow smile. "Daniel," she said softly, "no need to pay me. You asked first, that's what matters. I'm happy to give you some ideas." There was a pause on the line, then Daniel added, "If at any point you feel it's too much, just say so. I'll hire someone else right away." Linda's heart warmed. It wasn't the words themselves but the tone, genuine, careful, not assuming. "Thank you, Con," she said. "That means more to me than you know." They spent the next half hour on the phone, Daniel taking notes while she described color palettes, soft gold and cream to match the wine bar's walls, small mason jars with lavender sprigs for the tables, a string of fairy lights over the back patio. He listened, asked questions, even joked a little. For the first time, their planning felt like teamwork instead of an assignment. When the night of the party came, Linda arrived as a guest. She wore a navy blue dress and a light shawl, carrying only a small gift bag. Daniel had arranged everything, the catering trays steaming with tapas, the cake glowing under candles, a musician strumming acoustic guitar in the corner. Linda walked in and felt a rush of quiet pride. He had done it without her labor. Emily spotted her across the room. She came over quickly, eyes shining, and hugged Linda tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but heartfelt. "Thank you for the ideas. This is perfect." Later, when Daniel introduced his mother to Emily's friends, he did so with visible pride. "This is my mom, Linda. She's the one who gave me all the inspiration for tonight." Emily nodded, smiling. "She's family," she told them. Linda felt something loosen inside her chest. It was small, but it was real, the first tangible sign that her boundaries had planted new seeds. She wasn't the invisible worker anymore, she was a respected guest, a mother whose voice mattered. As she sipped her wine and watched Emily laugh across the room, Linda thought, this is what change looks like, not words, but actions. The fairy lights twinkled softly above her, and for the first time she truly believed they were building something healthier together. 3 months after the chaos of the wedding, the San Diego sun poured down on the colorful streets of Little Italy. Linda walked slowly along India Street, the scent of espresso and fresh bread drifting from cafes. She clutched her purse with both hands, her heart beat a little faster. Emily had texted her the night before, "Can we have lunch, just the two of us?" Linda had been unsure but said yes. Now she stood outside a small Mexican restaurant with bright turquoise doors and potted bougainvilleas spilling over the entrance. Through the window she saw Emily already seated, hands folded on the table, no makeup, no armor, just a young woman waiting. "Linda!" Emily stood up as soon as she entered. Her voice trembled but her eyes held a new steadiness. "Thank you for coming." Linda slid into the booth, the vinyl seat cool beneath her. The waiter brought chips and salsa, the smell of cilantro filled the air. They both reached for a chip at the same time and laughed softly. It broke the ice. Emily took a breath. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began, twisting her napkin. "I needed to understand why I felt threatened by you. It wasn't about you at all. It was about me losing my mom so young, and living with a stepmother who never wanted me. When you welcomed me, it scared me, like it was too good to be true. I panicked and tried to control everything. Her eyes glistened. I'm sorry I turned you into a babysitter. I'm sorry I disrespected you. Linda listened quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. She saw not the demanding bride from the wedding but a wounded 32-year-old trying to rebuild. Emily, she said softly, pain makes us do strange things. But apology is just the first step. What matters is how you live from now on. I want to start over, Emily said, voice cracking. Like the first time we met. Linda nodded slowly. Then we'll start from here. They raised their glasses of agua fresca like a quiet toast. As their plates arrived, enchiladas verdes for Linda, chicken tacos for Emily, the conversation turned lighter. Emily asked about Linda's recipes, the lemon cake that had become neighborhood famous. You should write a cookbook, Emily said earnestly. People need your food and your stories. On the drive home, the idea stuck. That night Linda sat at her kitchen table, the old spiral notebook of family recipes open before her. She thought about calling it Cooking with Love, Living with Dignity. For the first time, the title felt right. 6 months later, Daniel and Emily came over with shy smiles and an ultrasound photo. You're going to be a grandmother, Daniel said. And we want you to decide how much you're involved. No one will assume. You choose. Linda felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were soft, grateful tears. A year after the wedding, she stood at the front of a small independent bookstore in Hillcrest, holding the first copy of her published book. Rows of neighbors, old colleagues, and even some of Daniel and Emily's friends filled the chairs. Emily took the microphone during the Q&A and said, voice clear, the person who inspired me most is Mom Linda. She taught me that love and respect can walk together. The room erupted in applause. Linda smiled, a deep, quiet smile. She was no longer just the sacrificing mother. She was a grandmother-to-be, an author, and a woman who had reclaimed her dignity. Under the bookstore's warm lights, with the smell of paper and coffee around her, she thought, this isn't just an ending. This is the life I was meant to live. As the applause faded in the small bookstore, Linda closed her eyes for a moment and simply breathed. The weight of decades of silent sacrifice seemed to dissolve under the glow of the warm lights and the hum of soft conversations around her. Daniel stood at the back of the room, his arm wrapped around Emily's shoulder, both of them watching her with pride. For the first time in years, Linda didn't feel like an invisible helper. She felt like a whole person, a woman who had built, lost, and then rebuilt her own dignity. After the signing, Emily came over, placing a gentle hand on Linda's arm. Thank you for giving me another chance, she whispered. Daniel added quietly, Mom, you taught us how to grow up. Linda smiled at them both. We all taught each other, she said. In that moment, she understood that setting boundaries had not destroyed her family, it had saved it. Later that evening, back in her kitchen in Ocean Beach, she placed the first signed copy of her cookbook on the shelf next to her late husband's photo. The smell of ocean air drifted in through the window. She poured herself a cup of mint tea and thought of all the women and men who might be listening to her story right now, wondering if they too were allowed to say no. She wanted them to know they were. That is the heart of Linda's journey, love without self-erasure, respect without fear. Saying no does not mean withholding love, it means giving love its true shape. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors you choose when to open. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. Leave a comment saying I'm listening so we know you're with us, connected and part of this journey. Together we can spread stories of courage, self-respect, and healing. See you in the next video.